Okay, welcome to Threat Level Noon, where we discuss The Office. I hope that all of you were able to catch our first ever episode about the pilot episode of The Office, and if not, please take a look at that and give it a listen. Today, we will be talking about episode 2, Diversity Day, one of my personal favorites in season 1. So at this point, I'd like to introduce you to the people that will be with me every single episode of The Office. First, my good friend Michelle Stallman. Michelle, say hi.
Hello! I love sitcoms. Goodbye.
Yes, that's Michelle. And with us, as always, as well, is Andrew Runyon.
Hello, everybody. Good to be here today.
All right, and we are really excited to dive into Diversity Day.
So we're going to go ahead and start out with some of the historical context for the episode. So last time I talked about the state of the sitcom landscape at the time of the premiere of The Office. So if you want to hear all of that, you can go back and listen to the last one.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. But for this episode, there's quite a bit less to explain. I think that one of the things to just kind of consider is that a lot of the jokes in this episode really show how long ago it came out. I kind of forget that sometimes when you're watching it because a lot of the stuff in The Office kind of transcends, like, the boundaries of, like, the era. And so there's a lot of, like, normally most of the jokes still work totally fine, and a lot of them are still funny, but I think that the plot line itself of the boss saying racially insensitive things is very plausible today and is, like, likely a plot line. But I think that a lot of the jokes wouldn't be allowed on the network today. So when this episode premiered, about 5 million people watched it, which was half of the number of people who watched the pilot the week before. This was because NBC originally intended for The Office to be on Tuesday nights, which is when this episode premiered. But since the pilot came out on Thursday night, which is arguably one of the most watched nights on NBC, viewership went way down when they switched. I believe it was in between Scrubs and ER, just for the record, this new lineup. Episode premiered on March 29th, 2005. The number one song that week was still Candy Shop by 50 Cent. And the number one movie was Sin City. So we're going to go ahead and do a brief recap of this episode.
Yeah, so the whole premise is that Michael was making inappropriate comments regarding a sketch by Chris Rock, which we'll get into a little bit later. Obviously, Michael's impression was offensive, so they are now required to attend diversity training with Mr. Brown. To start off, Michael is trying to play it off like it was his idea to have this training, which obviously it wasn't. But then during the meeting, there's a really funny scene where Mr. Brown has someone reenact the scene that Michael was, trying to do an impression of. Instead of Michael playing the Chris Rock part, Kevin does it.
Basically, there are two types of black people. And black people are actually more racist because they hate the other type of black people. See, every time the one type wants to have a good time, then the other type comes in and makes a real mess.
Honestly, this is my favorite part of the episode for Kevin. I think it's his funniest scene in season 1. And just before this scene, Michael, who's upset about Kevin playing the Chris Rock character, says that Kevin is a great accountant, but not much of an entertainer. But when he says that, we cut to a scene where Kevin is at his desk with a giant pencil, marking up what appears to be a phone book. I'm not entirely sure how this is relevant, but I missed it like a lot of my times through The Office, and I think that it's really funny to watch Kevin play with a huge pencil. Then Michael interrupts, and it all goes downhill from there for him. Mr. Brown ultimately leaves and has everyone sign a paper that says they learned something. Michael signed it, of course, as Daffy Duck. We also see during this episode Jim trying to make his biggest sale of the year, and Dwight keeps getting in the way of it. Whether it be the shredding paper scene at the beginning or Jim's inability to call them during the day, Dwight does ultimately get the sale, which is kind of a bummer for Jim. Then comes the real gem of the episode, in my opinion, Michael's own diversity training. So it starts off with just talking, but then we get to see Michael distribute note cards with different quote-unquote races on them, and then they're supposed to walk around and try to guess what is on their card based on how others are treating them. So believe it or not, this is an actual diversity training exercise that is still commonly used in business.
What?
It is. That's real. I think that it can easily be bonkers offensive, although maybe only when fake races are used. I'm not sure. We end the whole episode where Michael is mad that people aren't engaging enough / being offensive. So when Kelly walks in, he tells her to try my cookie, and then she slaps him. Glorious moment for her, an actual coming out party for Kelly. The only other thing that really happens here is that Jim and Pam together at the end. Pam is on Jim's shoulder, and it's super cute. Jim ends the episode by saying it was a pretty good day, which is pretty awesome considering Dwight totally screwed him. There is one part of the story that we are not shown, which is why Dwight stole Jim's sail. So I'm not sure how much research you guys have done into this, but during Michael's training exercise, right after Dwight asks if he is a woman, because he's a bad driver, I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit later, Jim replaces his note card with one that says Dwight. So now Dwight is walking around with a note card that says Dwight on it. Then he and Pam have a really long conversation where Dwight has no idea what he is until Angela tells him. Then he gets really mad, and we see him go immediately to the phones. So that's all on a deleted scene. At this point, we're going to kind of talk about our overall thoughts of the episode, and there's kind of a lot to unpack in this episode. But I think that this is really where The Office starts to become The Office for me. I say that as it's only episode 2, but it wasn't a shot for shot like it was the first episode based on the British version of The Office. It's kind of their own individual takes on stuff, and then getting the dialogue of the different races and Michael's makeshift diversity training, I think, is absolutely hilarious. Andrew?
Yes, like this is one of my favorite, if not my favorite episode as well. I was sold on this from the pilot from The Office when I was watching it. Originally, if I had any doubts if I was should be binging this for 5 days, this episode put those to rest. Just the consistent ability for Michael to refuse to actually learn or admit the problem, even like through the end, like every single moment, there's something. As soon as you think maybe he's starting to get it, he does something else that's like, oh no, he's not even close. You get a real insight into his character. And you get an insight as to what Jim's all about, too. Because it's like the one sale of the year where we see him try a significant amount of effort. And he doesn't get it, but it ends up not even mattering because he really doesn't care about his job that much. It's more about just going through life, living life for Jim. So I just really like this episode.
Yeah, I like this one a lot, too, obviously. I think there's a lot of good, funny moments. And it's like easy to watch. There's some episodes where you need a lot of background knowledge of like the characters and their history and stuff. This is one where you can turn it on without any previous knowledge and you can really just get a nice feel for it, which kind of makes sense considering that it's a very early episode, but I think it's still important. So what I thought was interesting was you kind of get to see, like he was talking about with how Michael's so inept at reading people. What's interesting is that all the other characters in The Office, a lot of them are shown to be very like big extremes in terms of, oh, this person's really dumb, this person's like really weird in this sense, in that sense. But what I think is funny is how when they're doing the exercise, each of them are like treating each other very nicely. I think it's Stanley and Pam where they're having a conversation where they're like, hello, how are you? And he's like, I'm good, how are you? And he's like, good. Yes. And Michael's like, treat them like the racist that you treat them. And it's like, that's how we would treat them. It's interesting to see how like they really didn't. It's like, obviously we know that the reason they got the training was because of Michael's actions, but it's just funny to see how really they really don't. They're fine. And it's just funny to see how like even however weird each of the characters are, they're still like pretty normal when it comes to like regular normal stuff.
And to that point, during that scene when it's between Pam and Stanley says, I admire your cultural success in America. And like, that is not the number one thing you would say if you had the word Jewish written on your head. Like that, you know, that's not exactly the number one thing you would say, but it's also not something that even Stanley in later seasons would say.
No, yeah, it's not.
So, you know, we could see some character development there. Obviously, Stanley is a much different character in that first whole season, I think, than in the rest of the seasons. I think they dramatically changed his character, but not even just the writing, just his overall, you know, perceptions of that character.
That's true.
Yes. All right, so the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to play a game.
All right.
And it's a doozy.
Oh.
So, it's pretty simple. I was toying around with the idea of each of us, like, taking a race and then, like, doing that activity. No. But I kind of felt like we might be pushing it a little bit with that.
Yeah. Very much so.
There's no reason for us to get controversial on this fun podcast about The Office.
Yeah, this is just for funsies.
There's no reason to do that. So, what we will each be doing is we're going to be reenacting Kevin's interpretation of the Chris Rock routine. But since he was Italian in the later scenes, we have to do it with a Kevin Italian's accent on Kevin's interpretation of the Chris Rock routine.
Do you have the text of the Kevin's interpretation of the Chris Rock routine?
Do I have the text of the Kevin's interpretation of the Chris Rock routine? Yes. Alright, so are we ready? Who would like to go first? I think Andrew's excited to go first.
I will go first.
So remember, we're doing Kevin's Italian accent on Kevin's interpretation of the Chris Rock routine.
Alright, here goes nothing. Basically, there's two types of the black people. Black people are actually more racist because they hate the other type of black people more. Every time one wants to have a good time, the other type comes and makes a real mess.
That was
very bad.
Brutal Italian accent.
It's hard to say those words in an Italian accent.
Yeah. All right, I'll give it a shot here.
All right.
Basically, there are two types of the black people. And black people are actually more racist because they hate the other type of black people.
It's turning French.
I know. Every time the one type wants to have a good time, then the other type comes in and makes a real mess.
You sound like the Napoleon character in Night at the Museum.
Yeah.
Alright, Michelle.
Yeah,
redeem us.
Touch my spaghetti.
Yes, okay, now that we've gotten that out of the way, come in and rescue us.
I got to give my somebody touch my spaghetti. Basically, there are two types of black people.
I want everyone to know that she's holding her hand out like
an Italian gesture.
Yes, I think everyone needs to know
Italian,
that.
I can do it, it's fine.
Oh, please continue.
Are actually more racist because they hate the other type of black people. What is this accent?
I don't know.
Spaghetti. Every time the one type wants to have a good time, then the other type comes in and makes a real mess.
Yes.
Mamma mia.
That was remarkable.
Oy.
I'm so glad that just happened.
Exactly.
And
That's not going to work.
This is what this show is all about, folks.
I really am glad that all of us have that recorded now.
Great. On the internet.
Okay. That was a lot of fun. Okay.
What's next?
Next, we're each going to be saying a hot take that we have on the episode. So let's bring in the hot takes. Oh, we got it. Hey, we got it. Oh, we got it. Hot takes. Oh, we got it. Oh, we got it. Yo, we got it. Hot take. I'll go ahead and start. I don't really understand the joke that Michael was trying to make with Kelly. Obviously, it was like the Simpsons reference with Apu, but I don't know. Something about it just didn't click for me. There wasn't like I don't get it. Whenever I watch that episode with someone else, they always think that that's like a really funny part of the episode, and I have never laughed at that part. I don't think it's very funny, so that's my hot take.
So I saw that was your hot take, so my hot take is related to that one.
Okay.
So I did, because I also it never really clicked with me. It was like fine, but it was like, it's not hilarious or anything. Like, I like Kelly slapping him though. That was pretty good.
Which was unscripted, by the way.
Ooh, nice. I forgot. I remember reading it once. Oh my goodness. Okay. So, yeah, I read that it was like the stereotypical, like, store owner stereotype thing. I'd read that the reason he says cookie is that he was trying to make it, the point was that Michael knows a little bit about Indian food and like Indian culture, and so he wanted to say something that sounded like it could be like an Indian food. And so there's I can't remember what the reference was that people were making when I had done some research on it, but there's another food that is like kind of like the same word copied twice, and it has a somewhat similar sounding name, not that close at all though. So he chooses to use cookie to be like the same kind of, to have that same kind of like cadence as whatever that other food is. And it's like, it kind of shows how Michael's like, he thinks he knows, like he thinks he's being like this worldly person, he knows all this stuff, but really he knows nothing. He's actually pretty ignorant, he just doesn't realize it.
Yes.
I'll talk about that for a second too. Yeah, because, and you do see the plush Homer Simpson at the very beginning of the episode, and I think that's an Easter egg, maybe a little bit of foreshadowing for that too, because Apu is like that stereotypical store owner.
And that Homer Simpson is in most of the episodes, of at least the first season.
I think the main part that's funny about it is like the cringe factor still, and also the fact that everyone else it was based on the card that they had on their head, where Kelly just walked in, had no context,
Yes.
had no
That's true.
had
Yes.
no context for what was happening to her, and he was doing it based on her actual race with like, it's not just a card that was on her head. So
Yeah.
it was like the
To be
whole
fair, that was also what they were doing to Stanley. But
yeah, but it's like that's just like according
Yes.
to Michael, that's not it was unintentional. But
Yes.
my hot take was the line by Michael right before he starts his diversity day to Toby, which just shows from the beginning his relationship and feelings towards Toby. Toby makes a joke about sitting Indian style, and everybody laughs. And then Michael gets really mad. He said, "This is an environment of welcoming, and you should just get the hell out of here." So it's like a very paradoxical
Yes.
statement.
All right, I have another game for us to play. This is not quite as embarrassing or jaw-dropping as the other game. At the end, as everyone's walking out, we hear Michael say,
Thank you, Brazil.
so he says, "Thank you, Brazil." And so what I have is I have a list of things that either were invented in Brazil or were not invented in Brazil.
Why?
And you have to guess either A, was it invented in Brazil, or where was it invented if it wasn't invented in
Okay.
Okay,
Brazil.
so like how French questions always are. True or false? If false, explain why.
Basically, yes. Yes. Who wants to go first?
I go first.
All right, Michelle. Helicopters. Were they invented in Brazil?
Well, I know that their police force uses them, but I'm going to go with no.
That is correct. That's a point for Michelle. And,
Wait, does she have to say where?
and a bonus point.
Okay.
Okay.
Where were they invented?
Okay, so I'm going to guess it's either UK or America or maybe Canada, but I doubt it. I'm going to go with it's the UK.
That is incorrect. The correct answer is Russia.
Russia!
Mother Russia is the
Soviet Russia helicopter.
birthplace of helicopters.
Obviously.
Okay, so it's 1-0. Andrew, the portable stereo cassette player. Was that invented in Brazil or not?
I feel like that's a very specific thing, and I don't know that it was invented in Brazil, but I'm just going to say yes, it was, just because it seems like something that you would just randomly think of.
That is correct. It was invented in Brazil.
Thank you, Brazil.
What? I would have thought it would have been Japan, because of like Sony Walkmans.
Portable stereo cassette players were invented in Brazil. All right, Michelle.
Uh-huh.
The first hot air balloon, was that invented in Brazil or not in Brazil?
I'm going to go with no. It was not.
That is incorrect. The
Really?
first hot air balloon is from Brazil.
Thank you, Brazil.
Wow.
Why?
Yes. Thank you, Brazil.
I mean, like, good job, Brazil.
Way to go. Way to go. Andrew, the first color television.
First color television, I'm going to say no.
That's correct. It is not invented in Brazil. Where was it invented?
I've heard a lot of history about the television, but I can't remember for sure. A lot of it had to do with the United States stuff. So I'm just going to say United States.
That's incorrect.
Is it UK?
No, the answer is actually Mexico.
Wow.
One?
I know. It was first invented in Mexico.
Interesting.
All right, Michelle. Wristwatches.
Wristwatches?
Wristwatches.
Well,
Invented in Brazil or not in Brazil?
no.
That's incorrect. They were invented in Brazil.
Well, I was going to guess that they were invented in, like, France or something.
They are from Brazil.
Thank you, Brazil.
Wow, we're really bad at this.
Wristwatches.
So the
Is
score is 2-0. Or 2-1, Andrew. All right, Andrew. Acupuncture.
Acupuncture. No, isn't that like a Chinese?
Wow, nailed it. It is not from Brazil and it is from China. Well done. 4-1. Michelle, you got some work to do
I
here.
knew that one.
ATM machine. From Brazil or not from Brazil?
Okay, well, every single time I've said no, but it's been from there, but I'm going to do it still. It's not from Brazil.
It is not from Brazil. That's correct.
Heck yeah.
And for a bonus point, where is it from?
The ATM machine. Japan.
Close. It's Vietnam. So
Oh,
kind of close. I'm
that's a random country. Well, it's closer geographically.
All right, Andrew.
Interesting.
Electronic voting machine. From Brazil or not from Brazil?
I'm going to say yes.
That's correct. It is from Brazil.
Thank you, Brazil.
So, Michelle, even though you are no longer capable of winning, yogurt.
Yogurt?
From Brazil or not from Brazil?
Gosh, yogurt. no, it's not from Brazil.
That's correct.
Cows are not native
And
to Brazil.
Maybe
correct?
we'll make this one worth 2 points.
If she gets where it's from, it can be.
Okay, so I'm picturing it in my head. and I
Picturing
think-
yogurt in your
I'm
head.
picturing like where yogurt would be from.
Sure.
Yogurt, I'm thinking it's somewhere in Europe. Oh, but it's really big in like Indian cooking too. Like yogurt sauce. So,
We're gonna have to-
England!
was
Wait. I want to try
incorrect.
this Greek.
Also incorrect.
man.
It's actually from Russia.
Oh, those Russians.
Yogurt is from Russia.
Doo-doo.
Okay, at this point, now that we've played 2 games, we're going to go to the character development segment with Andrew.
All right. To me, there's lots of good character moments, and we get a lot of character moments with Michael. But since he is kind of the focus of a lot of these first episodes, I wanted to go with a different character, and I wanted to focus on how a small moment that they did really gives you a lot of insight on a character. So I chose Kevin because his character is consistent throughout. He's the lovable doofus. He's clueless, but he's likable. And this is very much apparent in the very last part where everything's gone wrong. The diversity day is obviously over. And but he still has his card on his head. He's like,
Maybe some spaghetti.
maybe some spaghetti. Like,
Yes.
it's
Yeah.
like he's not aware of. He's like still playing the game. He doesn't even realize what's going on. It's like, and you don't fault him for it. Like you are still like him, but also
Yes.
like he just has no idea what's going on.
Yes, that's great. No, that's really good. And that's going to... A little bit of a precursor to the Dundee of the episode. Kevin
Yeah.
is who I chose as the best character because I think this
Yeah.
is really Kevin's episode. Obviously, Michael is still, big prominent in this episode, but this is
Yes.
really big for Kevin as well.
Yes.
Michelle, any thoughts on character development?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously still the characters are a bit different than they develop to be, which makes sense, but they make a lot more sense than they do previous to this.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
and a lot of the interactions between characters make a lot more sense. And like we were talking about with Michael and Toby, I think that's obviously gets more and more played up as like the seasons go on, but it's interesting to see that come out so strong at such an early point. But I think it's like it makes a lot of sense. It's very in character. It's very good. Yeah, I liked it.
All right, at this point, we're going to play our final game of the episode, which is just a trivia game. So for this trivia game, there's going to be 2 parts to it. The first is just the questions like we had last time. So without the multiple choice, 2 points. With the multiple choice, 1 point. If you go for 2 and you get it wrong, the other person can guess and get 1 point for it. And then after that point, we'll have a second part, but we'll get to that in just a second. So, Andrew, you won both of the games so far. So pick a number between 1 and 4 for your first multiple choice question.
3.
Okay, in a deleted scene, Michael makes up an acronym for what he wants diversity to look like in his office. What is that acronym?
I have no idea, but I will wager, I guess, anyway. The acronym they give...
So you can do multiple choice.
Okay, well, I'll go ahead and do multiple choice, but I was going to... Oh, yeah, go ahead and tell me the
All right.
multiple choice.
A, stripper. B, murder. C, incest. D, black. E, diabetes.
I'm gonna
It
go
is
with...
one of those, I promise.
I'm gonna go with the one that makes the most sense as an acronym, which I think is the shortest one. So I'm gonna go with black.
That is incorrect.
Really?
It's actually incest.
All of them are equally bad for different
Yes,
reasons.
it was tough to come up with like other options.
Yeah.
Because like the actual answer is incest. So
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
yes.
Huh, okay.
And then in that same deleted scene, Pam's like, you could have spelled insect, and Michael was like, no, I couldn't have. Yeah. All right, so it's still 0-0. Michelle, pick a number either 1, 2, or 4.
4.
Okay. When they pan over the accounting department, what fruit is Angela eating?
Well,
Would you like the multiple choice, or do you want
Yes,
to take a guess?
multiple choice,
Okay.
please.
A peach. B, a pear. C, a banana. D, an apple. Or E, a plum.
I was going to say it's a grapefruit, so that's none of the answers.
Oh, wow. Should have put that
A
on there.
banana.
That's correct! Michelle, up 1-0.
worst
Bananas are fine.
The funniest fruit, but also
This
the worst.
is not the place to get into this on, because bananas are amazing. Andrew, either 1 or 2.
2.
2, okay. How is Michael's note card actually notated or spelled out? Be very specific if you don't want the
Oh, I know
multiple
what
choice.
you're
It has to be exactly spelled out this way.
Oh, you like because it's. I mean, I know it's intended to say Martin Luther King Jr., but it's not.
But
Just go and give me the options.
Okay, so A,